I decided I was going to become a scientist when I was 5 or 6 years old. From high school, I went right into City College on 138th Street and Convent Avenue. That was in 1939. A couple of years later, the war started, and shortly thereafter, I was drafted into the Army. It was clear that the war wasn't going that all well, and they shipped everybody out to combat zones. But at that very moment, my commanding officer told me of something called the Manhattan Project. And since, of course, I was so eager to get back to Manhattan, I gladly was interviewed. So the next thing I knew, I was in a town called Los Alamos. My job was to develop triggers and to do photographic testing. So the months passed, a lot of our experiments failed. We'd keep trying them over and over, and they would succeed eventually. And by this time, the war in Japan was going full blast. It was obvious that a decision had been made to use the bomb on Japan. Eventually, I was given another job. I was chosen to help train the bombing crew on how to flip switches and how to put the wiring together and things of that sort. I shipped overseas to where the actual bombers were going to be deployed, which was an island called Tinian in the Marianas, which are very close to Japan. Tinian sort of looked like Manhattan. And believe it or not, the streets were named after Manhattan streets. There was a Broadway at 42nd Street, and this was where the Manhattan Project ended up. Now go figure that one out. There was no desire to waste a day. We knew that it was going to happen fast. The immediate problem was to end this terrible war, where soldiers were dying, where one of my best friends had just been killed. What would happen after the war, of course, we had no idea. My immediate feeling was that of a young idealist from the Bronx. I figured that it was could be such a terrible bomb that the world would just have to create universal peace. The day we arrived in Tinian, I started a diary. I certainly knew that it was how important this whole thing was. This was the night before the first bomb was dropped. And I was sitting in my bunk writing. Most of the fellows are gathered in one corner of the hut, and there is much excited talk. We know the takeoff time is 02:30. We know it's going to work, and all that remains to be determined is its effect on the war and in the target. I woke up in the morning, turned on the radio, and heard about the bomb. Everything changed at that moment, of course. It was no more than a week or so later that Japan surrendered. But the two bombs actually accomplished its purpose of ending the war. I have any doubt whatsoever about that.